So I suppose what we can go off is the Guardian's initial reporting of the suspicious activity request that was set, which I think we understand led to the freezing of the bank account for that 2-week period.
At first glance, Reform UK wants supporters to believe this is nothing more than another politically motivated attack. But the moment independent experts begin explaining what's actually being investigated, that argument starts to fall apart. Because this isn't about headlines or media spin anymore. It's about where the money came from, how it entered the party, and whether investigators believe the full story has been disclosed. Before we get to that expert analysis, let's see how this debate first unfolded on live television.
What's wrong with asking the questions?
There's nothing wrong with asking the questions, but from my perspective, it does feel like it's a stitch-up. They're trying to find every single thing to undermine reform. Now, I'm not a reform person, but every time I hear this story, I think they're trying to get him, they're trying to get their party. And what we should go back to is this. I'm a member of the Conservative Party, and I remember when the Conservative Party was getting a lot of dodgy Russian money, when they were giving all this money there, when all the Labour Party is getting all this money from the unions. Now, what investigations have gone into where these people have got their money from? And for me, the biggest problem in all of this is that actually it is madness when you have to rely on big donations in order to create parties. Where there's money involved, for me, there is an expectation, there is a sense of beholdenment, which is the problem with the whole system, that you've got to find these big donations. But I wouldn't say that they're any different to the other parties that have got money from sources that will suddenly sort of think, oh, is this right?
Isn't it about transparency, though? Because we know where the union's money comes from. That's not clouded. It's declared in advance. And certainly with the £5 million, the question is, why didn't he declare it?
We don't know whether it's transparency. You know, we have to trust that it is. What I'm trying to say is this. Every party has gone through the same process of actually, they're getting money from what can be perceived as dubious sources.
Wilfred insists reform is being unfairly targeted. But while he argues it's another establishment stitch-up, the discussion is about to shift from political opinion to something much harder to dismiss: basic questions of transparency and accountability.
Yeah, it could be. I don't think we're overly fixated on it. I think one really interesting thing which I picked up as well from when Wilfred was speaking is we are constantly hearing from Reform that they are the anti-establishment party. They're saying we're going to fix broken Britain, we are different, we're building from the ground up, but actually they are relying on the same sort of establishment funds that other parties get, like Labour, Conservatives, these big donations, the kind of structural flow of money. They get these huge donations, and to get donations from someone who's nicknamed as Posh George, who's very much from the establishment himself, I think is potentially one of the oldest establishment plays in the book. I find this very, very interesting. But the thing is, you can't just say that something is a smear or, you know, it's against us. And it kind of reminds me of almost like, you know, the squeaky wheel that gets more oil. It's almost like shouting, label it a smear, label it as they're unfairly picking on us. And I wonder, well, actually, they're just asking questions. Investigations is how accountability works.
Yeah, but if it was fair, if this is right, let's look at all the parties of where they get the money from.
But I'm sure
that would be reasonable. But no, it's just that they're being targeted. I mean, where does the Conservative get their money from?
But the Conservatives they've had skin in the game for so long. They've been doing this for so long. They know that transparency and clarity are key.
Or they know
I imagine that they actually
know how to play the system.
Well, they're probably a bit more used to actually knowing what they have to declare and knowing the rules around declaring it. And I wonder how much Reform, having been so newly in the door with this, are not quite up to standards as Labour, as Conservative are with actually declaring
I don't know how much we can describe Christopher Harborne or George Cottrell or Fiona Cottrell as establishment figures. I mean, Reform is a party that is desperately trying to do things differently, to find places outside of the two-party system, and that's going to require them to look to donors who are encouraging them to do exactly that. I wouldn't say a crypto billionaire is the establishment. Surely, I mean, he didn't exist 50 years ago, did he?
Now the focus changes completely. Instead of debating motives, the panel starts questioning whether simply calling every investigation a smear campaign actually answers the concerns being raised. And that's where the conversation becomes far more uncomfortable for Reform.
No, it probably isn't cheap. But I will say, though, if you're going to rely on these huge donations, be transparent about it.
But hold on a second.
Actually, be transparent about it. Have clarity. And when people question you about it, don't try and palm them off as a smear, or, you know, it's just a big, they're picking on us. Just expect the questions to come in, have your answers ready. I would have so much more respect if actually they said, investigate me, we've got nothing to hide.
I stood as a candidate, okay, and it's really expensive to run a campaign, and it's really difficult to get money from the grassroots. People just don't. So the only way that our system works is when you get these big donations, or I ended up having to pay a lot of it myself, my own money. So that's why the system is broken, is that it could only operate if you have big donations, because unlike in America where Obama won his because you had all these donations from grassroots, because everybody in America are very, very committed to their politics. In this country, to try and get a donation out of ordinary people is just, you know, it's impossible.
I bet you had your...
Reform supporters argue the party is simply being treated differently. But as the panel points out, transparency isn't optional. If every donation can be fully explained, then public scrutiny shouldn't be something to fear.
£1 million, Cottrell bank account frozen, or Reform bank account frozen after the Cottrell allegations. The other two, just quickly, Nigel Farage, the £5 million gift that you may have heard about, that was reported to the National Crime Agency over money laundering concerns. Reform UK again saying Nigel Farage has said he's done nothing wrong. There was the standards probe into Nigel Farage. That, of course, has been paused because he's no longer an MP. And then Nigel Farage also separately, with regards to George Cottrell paying for his security, and it said content creators, Nigel Farage saying he's done nothing wrong there as well, but there's no active investigation into that.
So that's five?
Five
investigations.
Five.
Gosh. Stay with us, because I'm just going to have a quick word with Dr. Sam Power, who is a lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol and an expert in political financing and electoral regulation. Sam, thank you for your time. Is it, I mean, normal is an odd word to use. Is there a precedent for major political parties having their bank accounts frozen?
So as far as I can tell, no, is the short answer. I was racking my brains when I was asked about this on Sunday when the Times story broke. And the only equivalent example I can think of is the British National Party in 2004 were effectively debanked, to use a phrase, by Barclays after some pretty horrific undercover reporting was outed of some pretty horrific things that they were saying. But that was a bank's decision to effectively absent themselves from being involved with a political party. Never has, as far as I can understand, a bank account been frozen as a result of a National Crime Agency investigation.
Yeah, you may have answered my next question, in which case, is that just to channel the spirit of the late Donald Rumsfeld, in the context of unknown unknowns, we know that they're not, I don't think there's a parallel with the BNP example that you provide.
The television debate raises the questions. Now comes the evidence. Over on LBC, the discussion moves beyond political talking points and into the actual flow of money that investigators are trying to trace.
I mean, what other grounds might there be for a political party's bank account to be frozen in this way?
So I suppose what we can go off is the Guardian's initial reporting of the suspicious activity request that was set, which I think we understand led to the freezing of the bank account for that 2-week period. And the quote from the National Crime Agency about suspicious activity requests more generally is that these quite often happen when there is knowledge or suspicion of money laundering. Now, again, it's not necessarily the case that this money was that, but quite often they come in when there is knowledge or suspicion of that. That is not, to be clear, proof of a crime, proof of money laundering, but quite often I think suspicious activity requests do what they say on the tin, really. There is a big amount of money that is being transferred from one place to another, and there's some suspicious activity sort of going on, or potential suspicious activity. So they freeze the source of that money or freeze the provenance just for a minute to check out what's going on.
And for not just the benefit of my listeners, but also for me, how does a National Crime Agency investigation differ from a Metropolitan Police investigation?
Well, it's actually sort of two different investigations that are happening. National Crime Agency is investigating the provenance of the funds and the potential, perhaps, money laundering behind it.
This is where the story takes its biggest turn. Instead of speculation, a political finance expert explains why investigators are examining both the source of the money and the way those donations entered Reform's own structure. That legal distinction changes the entire conversation.
What the police are investigating is electoral law, specifically what the provenance of these donations, and very specifically, they're looking at whether the provenance of these donations was hidden in any way, whether the true source of the donor was indeed Britain Means Business and was indeed Fiona Cottrell.
And who is accountable if donations are found to be impermissible? I mean, obviously, the person who gives the money is ultimately responsible for the donation, but how accountable is the recipient of the money if it turns out, and we should stress that Reform, and I quote, takes pride in its stringent vetting of donations and always ensures that the Electoral Commission guidelines on donations as set out in the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act 2000 are strictly followed, and has been the case with donations so far. But in the spirit of asking questions, how accountable is the recipient of a donation that is found to have been impermissible?
So the legal requirement almost entirely...
So after hearing both sides, one thing becomes clear. Reform supporters may genuinely believe these investigations are politically motivated, while others argue they're a necessary part of public accountability. But simply describing every uncomfortable question as a smear campaign doesn't resolve the issues that investigators are examining. Throughout these discussions, the focus repeatedly returns to transparency, the source of political donations, and whether the rules have been properly followed. Those are ultimately matters for the relevant authorities to investigate, not for political slogans to settle. Whether these inquiries uncover wrongdoing or ultimately clear everyone involved, the process itself is intended to establish the facts. And that's why these questions continue to attract attention. The debate isn't only about Nigel Farage or Reform UK, it's also about how political funding should be scrutinised and how much transparency the public should expect from any party seeking power. What do you think? Are these investigations a legitimate exercise in accountability, or has Reform UK been treated unfairly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.